What's up everyone, it's a Knife Side here, and today I'm going to be doing my EDC update for the Spyderco Gayle Bradley 2. And this has been a knife that I've used a bunch in the 3 or 4 months probably that I've had it, and I feel like I definitely have enough use and experience with this knife to give you guys my full EDC update on it. And these EDC update videos are probably my favorite to make just because I have a little bit more use on them than I do when I first do my review. Even though my review, I usually wait about a week or two in order to do it. But this one, I have even more use on it. And usually any, I guess you could say buyer's justification goes away by the time I make these videos. Because sometimes, I think we can all relate. When you first get a knife, you want to like it a lot more than you might in the future just because you spent the money on it and you don't want to feel like you wasted your money. And so I feel like any buyer's justification will go away with these videos, but let's get into it. And this has been a knife that I have used and carried a bunch, and it won the most carried of 2020 for me. And it's been a knife that if I'm ever deciding on what knife to carry, I know I have a lot of knives, a lot of different options, but this is a knife that I go to a lot of times, and it's one that I really like to use, and I have used a lot. I have a couple of hairline scratches on this. I'll try and show them off. Yeah, there they are. That one vertical, I think that's just a rub mark or something. But those scratches right there are just from use. And then there's some right there too. So I always mention that this knife is scratched up, and then I feel like I never am able to pick it up on camera. But there you go. I feel like this has been a knife that I just feel like has really gone through a lot of use for me. It hasn't been a knife. I feel like this has been a hard user in my definition of hard use. I feel like that the definition of hard use gets thrown around a little too much. I feel like some people's definition of it is just how many non-knife things you do with your knife, like how many holes you dig with it, how many things you pry with it. This one has just been, I guess I could call it a hard use cutter for me. One that if there is like a major cutting task I have to do around the house, this is the knife I gravitate towards, and I will explain to you why. But first, let's talk about the looks, how they've held up over this time. And I really like the finish on this blade, just the satin up here with kind of the brushed flat. I think that it looks really good. Now keep in mind that you saw those scratches originally. That is just something that happens with the satin finish. You know, that's kind of why I like stonewash finishes more, just because they hide those scratches, because pretty much the whole blade is scratched up. But this isn't bad because this is a knife that I'm going to use a bunch, and so I almost like the scratches because they're kind of like wear marks in character. But the reason that I wouldn't like to have scratches on all of my knives is because if you guys, you know, I'm not hard using every single knife that I own. So, you know, it kind of, not that I'm worried about the resale value, but sometimes I want to keep my knives looking a little bit better, especially if I don't use them as much. So that's why I prefer stonewash, but I do really like the finish, and I like it now that it does have a little bit of character to it. For the looks of this carbon fiber, I actually think it looks pretty good. Or these carbon fiber G10 laminate scales. I'll talk more about them a little bit when I talk about the ergonomics of this knife, but I really like the shadow box liners. I think that it just kind of is like an outline, and it makes the knife pop a little bit more. And overall, I think this is just a pretty good looking knife. The design is a little bit funky, but it's a very functional and utilitarian based design, which I really do like. So let's talk a little bit more about the blade. Let me get a thickness behind the edge measurement for you guys. And you guys are honestly probably tired of me talking about this, but I feel like if anyone's new to me talking about the Gayle Bradley 2, you'll learn why I like it so much. So that thickness behind the edge measurement right there, 7.5 thousandths behind the edge. And then up there, 7.5 thousandths behind the edge. And I won't do any more measurements. But yeah, so extremely thin behind the edge, and it's a hollow grind. Let me see if I can get that to pick up on camera. It's also a hollow grind, that thin behind the edge with a decently thin stock. I believe it's around 120 thousandths. And so that is just, this knife is just such a good cutter. It's probably the best cutter that I own. And a bunch of people probably get scared when they see thickness behind the edge numbers like that. But I feel like that's just something that has been placed in people's heads, that if it's anything below, I don't know, 15 thousandths, that it's just gonna break. And this has been a knife that I've done a bunch of cutting with, and I have not experienced any issues with really that much of edge damage. Like sometimes I'll get some chips in there just from use, but not any overly glaring issues with edge damage. And I really feel like that knives that are thinner behind the edge. I think every EDC knife out there should be under 15 thousandths. That's just my opinion. You know, it kind of varies when you get into the different types of knives and your preference for those, but I really like how thin this blade is. This blade shape, it's just a simple drop point, and I think that it cuts very well. I do kind of prefer the Insingo blade to this, just because it's a very good blade shape, the Insingo blade from Chris Reeve. But it's one of those things where this is still a drop point blade shape, also one of my favorite blade shapes. Very simple, very effective, and I really do like it. My main complaint with the blade is that there is that kind of bad edge termination there. It's got a smile towards that plunge, and it's just going to get worse over time. I got some files, but they were very crappy, and I should have just invested in some nicer ones and not have wasted my time with some cheap ones. But yeah, I will try and fix that in the future. Right now, it's not that big of an issue, but it does look kind of bad. But that thing right there, that's the only bad thing with the blade. If there was a good edge termination or like a good sharpening choil like there is on the Sabenza, this blade would be pretty much perfect in my opinion, and I just really like it. The M4, how it's held up over time, it's held up good. I mean, I really haven't had any complaints with it. Honestly, it hasn't, with me and steels, it's one of those things where it's kind of hard for me to tell the difference between different steels. Now this one, I could tell the difference from something like S30V or S35VN, just because it holds its fine edge a lot better than those steels. What I mean by fine edge is like kind of that ultra sharp hair shaving edge that you get right after you sharpen it, if you sharpen it up good, I guess. But one thing I've noticed with steels like S35VN is that after, or sometimes just after a little bit of use, I'll notice that it loses its hair shaving edge, but it holds that working edge for a very long time, which is a good thing. For this one, I feel like it holds that fine edge for a long time and also holds a working edge for a long time. So I really like M4. I haven't had many rust issues. I have gotten a little bit of some spots here and there, but it's one of those things where I don't really care about the rust that much. I mean, if it rusts enough where it looks good, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to do a forced patina or anything, but I think that overall this blade looks fine how it is. For sharpening, this has sharpened up very nice. Because it's so thin, it sharpens up extremely fast. It touches up very fast too, strops up easily. And what I usually do with this steel, I usually take it to 600 grit, so pretty toothy edge for me, and then I strop it. I just got some new strop compound. It's like 4 micron diamond spray or something, so I have been enjoying that, and I will use that a little bit more. And overall, this steel has held up great, and it's to the point where it's so thin behind the edge. Knives like this, I almost don't even care that much to keep them sharp, because a knife that's like, I don't know, 20 thousandths behind the edge, like this Manix 2, I like to keep it pretty frequently sharp, sorry about that, because the reason I like to do that is because when these knives get a little bit duller, it's hard to get your initial bite, that initial cut into your material, just because it's a little bit thicker behind the edge that you're going to cut through. So when this is so thin, it's very easy to cut through almost anything. And you honestly, I bet I could completely dull this knife to the point where it couldn't cut my finger if I ran my finger across it, and it would still probably perform, be able to cut tape and cardboard and all my other main EDC stuffs, or all the other stuff that I cut very easily. I really like thin behind the edge knives, if you don't know already. But I think that it's time to move on and stop talking about that. Let's talk about the fit and finish and lockup. So for the centering, it is slightly off center to the left. Let me show you that right there. We have no blade play here. Absolutely no lock rock. This is a very well done liner lock. Just a good locking mechanism done in general. Spyderco does a great job with locks other than the compression lock. Or I mean, they do a good job with the compression lock too, but I feel like some people think that Spyderco is just a compression lock company, but they're not. As you can see around, there's that pocket lint, and then that tang right there. You can see that a large portion of this lock, or maybe the entire lock, is interfacing with that tang, so that is always something good that you want to see. And I recently did a video talking about why you shouldn't be impressed with a drop shut action. The main reasons were that a lot of times they're achieved with weak lock bar pressure, and this is a knife that I use as an example of the good, because I cannot push this lock bar over at all to the point where it's really hurting my thumbnail. And look at this, it'll drop to my thumb like this, but it takes a bit to actually shake it closed just because it's got decently strong lock bar pressure, and I really like to see that. This is a very well done liner lock. This and the Spyderco Military are probably the best liner locks that I have. I'd say the Military is just a little bit better because it's got the radius lock tang, and I won't get into all that, but I really like this liner lock. It's very well done, and I like seeing Spyderco doing stuff other than the compression lock. Not that the compression lock's bad, just a lot of times it might give you a hot spot on your hand with some use, and just a good old liner lock like this is a really good locking mechanism that I really enjoy. So a thing that a lot of people, their main complaint with this knife is the lock bar access, and here are my thoughts on that. The reason, a lot of people have told me, and I did some research, I found it out that Gayle Bradley, the designer of this knife, did not want there to be a decent amount of lock bar access like on the Sabenza or something like this, because when you use the knife, if you are using, like, let's say you're pushing on the back of the spine and you're kind of twisting up like this, you can catch that liner and disengage the lock. Let me see, some knives I can do this. Sorry, I'm kind of rummaging through my case here, seeing if I can find it. Yeah, I think I can do this with my Kershaw Leak. Let me try and get this on camera. But let's say you're like cutting and you're twisting. Did you see that? I just disengaged it there. Sometimes it's hard to do, but I guess if I don't even know what I'm doing here, but I did it once, so I guess that counts. But yeah, you can disengage that lock sometimes if you're doing hard use, kind of twisting your hand, you can disengage a liner lock. And so for those reasons, he did not give very much lock bar access, so you wouldn't have that issue. Now, my thought about that is, this one has enough lock bar pressure on it that I don't think you're going to accidentally disengage it with that. You're going to have to use a lot of pressure in order to do so, because look at the Sabenza. You might be like, well, that doesn't have, or that has a bunch of lock bar, a big lock bar cutout. That should be an issue when you're doing it in use. One, it's a frame lock, so the rest of your hand's kind of pushing this part down. And two, this has a pretty high amount of lock bar pressure as well, because the pocket clip's sitting on there and it's just a strong lock. And so it takes a bit of effort to push this one over. And so for those reasons, I don't know how necessary this is, but I don't really care, because what I like to see is I like to see designs of knives that are more than just pictures. It seems like sometimes with new designers nowadays, yeah, the designs look cool, look futuristic, all this kind of stuff, but you're like, this person could just be a graphic designer or just some sort of creative artist. How do you know that they actually know how to use a knife? This one, it's pretty much just, who cares how this knife looks? Who cares how fun it is to play with? Let's make one of the most functional knives that there is. And I feel like this knife does that excellently, and that's what I really like about it. So even though that, would I like to see some more lock bar pressure or lock bar access? Sorry, I keep mixing up all my lock bar vocabulary. Would I like to see more lock bar access? Yes, but do I think it's really that necessary? No. Because this actually gives you, it's not that hard to close. You have a chamfer here, and there is some jimping right here. And so when you just open this, 10 or 15 times a day, if you're using it a good bit, you're not really going to have any issues with that. And it's really, there isn't much discomfort to it. Now, if you're sitting on the couch watching TV, opening and closing this about 50 to 100 times a night, yeah, your thumb's probably going to be pretty torn up. But just doing that little bit right there, it's not horrible. My thumb is always kind of ripped up from playing with knives so much, but it's one of those things where this lock bar access is not an issue to me. And a bunch of people do a mod where basically they take a Dremel and they remove this shadow boxing right here. That's great. I think that if you really want to, if you're comfortable with that, go ahead and do it if that makes the knife a lot better for you. But for me personally, I don't really think that I need to do that. Also, if you still have some issues with closing it, you can use your pointer finger like that, kind of what you do with Medfords on a lot of them. But overall, on the issue of the lock bar access, I am fine with it because it's a part of the design. And when you're just using this knife, not only opening and closing it for when you are using it, not just playing with it, this is not an issue with the lock bar access. So anyway, sorry about that little ramble there. Let's move on to other aspects, sorry, I can't talk, of this knife. The ergonomics of this. So the ergonomics on the Gayle Bradley 2, they are very good, and I really like them. I've talked about this a lot, but the ergonomic lines, just looking at them, They look kind of funky, but they're also pretty simple. Don't pay attention to this back right here, but just look at this. It's one very shallow finger groove, and then just kind of a shallow swoop, I guess. I don't really know what to call that. But what that does is you can really put your hand anywhere on this. You can grip the knife like this. You can completely hold the knife in the reverse grip, and it feels pretty much just as good as it does in this grip. So I really like the ergonomics. They're very simple, and this would be great for many different hand sizes, many different grips, because a lot of people, they pick up a knife and they're like, yeah, it's comfortable like this. But when you go to use it, you know, a lot of times I'm using my knife like this or in a pinch grip like this, and so I never really grip the knife like this. And that's why I like knives with simple ergonomic lines, because whether you're wearing gloves or not, whether your hands are big or not, whether you're doing a bunch of different grips, the knife will be comfortable. And that's why I feel like the Gayle Bradley 2, it's kind of like a Spyderco Sebenza, you know? I know that it's kind of a weird comparison, but I really do like both of these knives, and I'm going to do a comparison soon enough. I kind of want to do some actual testing too. I'm going to be doing the Gayle Bradley 2 versus the Sebenza versus the Umnumzaan. Just talking them through, talking prices, talking about how they actually compare. Because a lot of times when you compare a large batch production knife like a Spyderco to a Sebenza, it's just kind of I don't know. It just seems like you're kind of laughing, and it's like you're not worthy enough to even be compared to the Sebenza. But this knife, I think it might give the Sebenza a run for its money with how thin this blade is and how comfortable it is. Sebenza is also comfortable, you guys know that, but it's one of those things where I'm really excited for that video, so be on the lookout for that fairly soon. But more about the ergonomics on this knife. It does have this kind of dip down here and then a little incline back here. Holding it in your hand, that's comfortable, so I don't really have any complaints about that. But what people might complain about is when you have a swoop or like an incline in the back, what that does is that kind of creates a pressure area for your hand. So basically in use, it's not going to be the entire width of the knife that's hitting your hand. It's just going to be this little spot hitting in a certain spot on your hand, which could, over a long period of cutting, kind of create not really a hot spot, but more of like a worn mark, I guess you could say. And also, I guess one more complaint with the ergonomics could be that I do this little ergonomics test, and it's pretty dumb and not really many knives pass it. But basically, I'll take like 6 or 7 layers of cardboard and just take my knife to it and just push as absolutely as hard as I can and see if I can cut through them. So I'm pretty much using all the strength that I have in my body to cut through that cardboard. And what happens is that I get a little hot spot like right in this area because it inclines up to this Spidey hole right here. And what that does is when you're pushing down with on the cardboard, the blade is coming back up, but you're still pushing back down. So it really probably looks like this if you zoom in on what you're doing in slow motion. And so this little spot right here is putting in my hand right here, and I actually have kind of a blister from that. It's not from this knife, it's from different knives, but yeah, it is something that happens. And so that goes to show you that is such a hard cardboard test that it does give kind of rip up my hands a little bit. What knife would that be? I think that was probably the Mannix that did that. I don't know, but anyway, that is my conclusion on the ergos. Overall, I love the simplicity of them. It is very comfortable. There is that little issue with the hot spot right there. But keep in mind, that is not an issue at all. Like, for 99% of my cuts, usually the max of cardboard layers I cut at a time is 2 or 3, and so I'm never going to be cutting 6 layers of cardboard at once, and so that's not really an issue to me. And technically, this little incline back here could create a little wear spot in your hand, but I have never noticed that. There are 2 things more on the ergos that I want to highlight that I think are very non-Spyderco, and I think that I really like. So look at this jimping right here. It is just one small patch of jimping, one incline. I keep saying the word incline. I don't know. I must like that word today. But just this one little small patch of jimping, and it actually isn't that aggressive, and it feels pretty good on your hand, and it isn't really doing much, which is what I like for jimping. For a lot of Spyderco knives, like the PM2, the Mannix, they have jimping here and jimping here, and it's pretty aggressive stuff. It's pretty fine, and it does work, don't get me wrong, but it's just not what I would want. A lot of times with knives, I'd honestly rather there just not be any jimping at all. And so I like this because there pretty much is none except that small little patch. So I am happy with that. One thing that I also want to highlight is that these handle scales aren't really contoured, but they actually kind of are with the shadow boxing. So if you look at this, it's almost like it goes from the extended liner, and it's almost, imagine it as just a small curve all the way up to the top of this corner of the carbon fiber laminate scales. And even though it doesn't look like a chamfer, what it does is in use, it feels like these handle scales are chamfered, which if you're looking at something like the PM2, there is hardly any, maybe like a very tiny chamfer going around on these things. So overall, these shadow box liners aren't just for looks, they actually do increase the ergonomics a lot. And yeah, I really like these. I just really like the Gayle Bradley 2. I feel like every single thing is thought out about it, kind of like the Sabenza in a way. So once again, making a case for the Spyderco Sabenza. But anyway, on to the next little part of this EDC update. For the carry of this knife, the carry, this is going to be a little short aspect, I guess. It's in that 4-ounce range. It's actually heavier than most Spydercos. A lot of times Spyderco, their regular models, they are actually very good at keeping the weight down. For example, the military, this is like what, a 9.5-inch knife, and it's 4.3 ounces, which is absolutely crazy. This thing carries like a 3.5-inch bladed knife, and it's got like a 4-inch blade on it. So Spyderco does a good job on weight. This one is a little bit beefier because it has these full metal liners. Is there some skeletonization? Yeah, there are some holes on this side and a couple on the lock side. I don't want to spend the time to show that because I think you guys will take my word for it. But overall, the carry on this, it's simple. A lot of people change it to a lynch clip. Personally, I don't really care. I think that it's fine with a stock clip. And one thing I want to highlight is the Spyderco stock clip. I don't feel like it gets as much credit as it deserves. I feel like it's a really good clip. I mean, it's got good retention. It doesn't ride deep in the pocket because it's not a deep carry, but what it does is it always gives you a little bit to grab onto, and I appreciate that. A lot of people, there's a deep carry clip craze going on right now that I really don't understand. People just push deep carry, deep carry, deep carry, and then it's really like, why do you want a deep carry? And there isn't that good of an answer for it. Maybe they want to conceal their knife more because they live in kind of a scared environment. I don't know, but I'm not trying to conceal my knife, especially not just a basic functional pocket knife. I don't really care that much. And so this pocket clip, it's simple, it's effective, it slides in and out of the pocket nicely, and I like it. Also, another note on the Spyderco stock kind of spoon clip here is it is never a hot spot in my hand for pretty much all the knives. Here's it on the military. Not even a hot spot at all, putting my whole hand right on this clip. So I think that's something that we can appreciate, that the Spyderco stock clip, everyone's always like, oh, why don't they make a deep carry clip? They'd make so much more money on that. It's a pretty good clip. I actually kind of like it. So anyway, on to the action of this knife. So the action, there's another little part of this that I guess is a bit controversial. The detent on this is light. I'll show this to you. So as you heard there, it's a very light detent, and I actually can shake this. I'll do it off camera, but just listen for the noise of it opening. So I was able to shake it out. Personally, the shake test is dumb. I don't believe in it unless you are like, I don't even know what you could do to possibly get the knife to open in your pocket, but you can shake it out. So the detent is lighter, and a bunch of people don't like that because, you know, Spidey flicking the knife, I just did it there. But a lot of times, you know, you'll accidentally do it a little bit too light or something like that. See, it's really not that bad. I can still pretty easily do it, but a lot of times if you're not thinking, you will just kind of lightly do it out like that. And it's not like your regular kind of Spyderco detent, like on a compression lock or on the Sage 5, you can pretty much hardly even think, and it still shoots out very nicely. And so I feel like a bunch of people will be turned away from this kind of lighter detent, but what I like about it is a light detent makes slow rolling super easy, and I slow roll my knives a lot. I'm not trying to say a slow roll is better than a thumb flick, but I just open my knives a lot like that just because I feel like opening it like that, it draws more attention. And not that I'm trying to be subtle or stealthy or something, but it just, I thumb roll my knives a lot. I don't really know. That's probably my preferred way of opening. And so a light detent feels a lot better. When you thumb roll with a heavier detent, it kind of like jumps like that, you know. it just jumps out a little bit on you, so you kind of got to go fast. Now, you can still kind of push it this way and then slow roll it like that, but it's still just not as easy as a slow roll on a light detent. Once again, another comparison to the Spyderco. Spyderco has a very light detent. Like that. That's a very light detent. And then you can slow roll it very easily. Like that. So I really like this knife. I like the action. I think it's very good. It's running on phosphor bronze washers, and it has smoothened out over time. It drops to my thumb like that, as you can see, but it doesn't drop shut because of that lock bar pressure. But it's one of those things where I actually have never taken this knife apart. I actually do think I have put KPL in this thing once, but I have never taken it apart, and that's saying something because I don't take apart my knives that much, just because I don't find it that therapeutic, and I feel like a lot of times whenever I do, you know, maybe I put it back and it's a little bit off center, and I just feel like it's not as good as before. Maybe I'm not the best knife disassembler in the world, I don't know, but I just don't really take the time to take my knives apart that much, and I think it's saying something that this knife is so smooth and has broken in nicely from the factory like that. So I really like the action on this. I like the slow detent, even though a lot of people might not, and I think that it is a very well-tuned knife. On the last category, we are closing in on 30 minutes, about 4 minutes away. I think I can get there. No, for the value of this knife, $171 is the price on this, I believe. And I personally feel like that is one of the best values on any Spyderco out there. A lot of times, like, I don't think that's anywhere close to overpriced. I would pay, now I'm thinking about it, I'd probably pay $250 for this knife and still be happy with it. But now, keep in mind, that's personal preference for me. Some people might not even pay $100 for this knife just for other reasons, I don't know. But the PM2, I think this version was $160 with the S35VN blade, and the regular version is like $155, $160-ish, I don't know. But only $10, $15, $20 more than the PM2, with M4 carbon fiber laminate, with very comfortable ergos, a deep hollow grind, super thin behind the edge, simple drop point blade shape with a very well done liner lock, made in the Taichung, Taiwan factory. I forgot to mention that, sorry about that. But I think that that is a great deal, and I think that this is one of Spyderco's best value knives and one of my favorite Spyderco knives. I don't know if it is my favorite or not. I think I'm going to be doing a all my Spyderco knives ranked video. That'd be a very fun one to make. That will be a hard one to make though, because I feel like, you know, I have my least favorites, but then it seems like I have so many that could be maybe fourth one day and then second the next. I don't even know. But I'm going to stop blabbing about this. Overall, the Gayle Bradley 2, one of my favorite knives that I own. I really like this knife. One of Spyderco's best that they've ever made. And this is a knife that is not really like anything related to Spyderco at all, but is still such a well done knife. When you think of Spyderco, you would never think of this knife. You'd think of something like this, and I feel like this is really Spyderco showing that we're not just that company who makes weird looking compression lock knives. We can do a lot of other things, and even though this knife is older than most, and they did another recent run of it. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you guys for watching. If you're looking for a knife that is, well, if you want a good user knife, get this knife 100%. If you're a person that, you know, maybe you kind of admire your knives, play with them a little bit more, then I would probably not suggest getting this, just because it would not be very fun to just kind of look at and play with. It's more of a function over fashion kind of knife. But that is going to do it for the video. Finally, I'm going to end it right now and go get a drink of water, because my voice is kind of going away. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one.